Well, Molly, the White House did indicate through a press conference that the tour of the Indian Prime Minister to the United States has been successful. And also, there's this statement that the Prime Minister did make at the Kennedy Center. He says that neo middle class is continuously growing in India. The US and India are moving forward as the most reliable partners through the tour. How was this received by the business leaders in that forum?
Right, and also look at the way the messaging has been put out, Eric, both by the Indian Prime Minister and also by the American President, and also by Antony Blinken, who made that address. The business community has been taking note of the signals that have been sent out by the Indian side and looking at how the US is increasingly coming closer to India. That opens a window of opportunity. Earlier we were talking about how this is an important opportunity for the two sides to come closer in the areas of defense and technology, but specifically when it comes to the business community. And the very fact that there have been these many engagements that the Indian Prime Minister has had is a message, a strong message itself. And we will have to wait and watch what the business leaders, really have to say in terms of their reactions after those meetings with the Indian Prime Minister as the state visit comes to an end, and to what extent we actually see the statements coming in from a wide range of those leaders. But the fact remains that this is going to be just a beginning of the discussions between the two sides, because let's face it, this is at the end of the day an opportunity for India, for brand India, to showcase itself as a lucrative destination, which it has done through those engagements. And the American community, the business delegates here,
right,
some of whom have also been, making their statements ahead of the Indian Prime Minister's visit, have spoken about how they are optimistic about the way in which this partnership can actually propel the economic relationship as well between the two sides. Trade ties, of course, have found a prominent mention as well, with the numbers being indicative enough of how far along the two sides have come, with trade doubling just in the past decade.
Well, our correspondent Molly Gambhir is at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. We also have our diplomatic correspondent Siddhant Sibol, who is at the Ronald Reagan Center in Washington, D.C. Siddhant Sibol, the focus now changes to Africa, where the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is headed to Cairo in Egypt. And we do understand that the African nation is in the midst of a currency crunch and financial crisis. And there are reports that India is weighing in barter trade with Egypt in form of credit lines and some goods like fertilizer and gas. Do we have more information about the Indian Prime Minister's visit to Egypt?
Well, yes, the Indian Prime Minister is leaving for Egypt now. He will be traveling to Cairo. He will be there for 2 days. But essentially, before coming to Egypt, let me speak to other members of the diaspora who are waiting eagerly to speak to us. Sir, can you come this side and can you talk about the Indian Prime Minister's address? How do you see, can you sum up briefly to our viewers?
The flip of the 3 days visit of this is the more positiveness, the more confidence, and the more the attitude towards looking to India, progressive economy, progressive democracy, and all that stuff. That brings us about as an Indian staying in the overseas for the over the period of the time. We feel that yes, we have the leader who has the capability to lift up the India, and we feel that proud. And also Americans giving an opportunity to get that up there.
Sir, last one to you. How do you see the address by the Indian Prime Minister?
Oh, Indian Prime Minister, I see that everyone is happy and enjoying and proud for our Indian Prime Minister of Narendra Modi.
So clearly, the members of the diaspora elated over the address by the Indian Prime Minister. But coming to your question, yes, Egypt remains a country where, of course, there are certain economic issues, but that does not cause India-Egypt relationship. When it comes to India-Egypt relationship, there are several pillars. During this visit, we will see essentially these pillars being talked about, which includes first education. The Egyptians want IITs to be established in Egypt. India currently is working to establish first overseas foreign campus of IIT in Tanzania. Secondly, Egypt plays an important role in terms of giving a kind of a platform or perhaps a springboard for investors. Egypt has a number of FTA with the regional countries, so it is ideally placed. Remember, it is one of the most, in fact, the most populated country of the Arab world. This is a country which is one of the largest economies of Africa. Essentially, has I would say, dual views in terms of Africa and in terms of the Arab world, but largely how India sees relationship with Egypt is a civilizational relationship. In fact, the Egyptian president was in India earlier this year when Egyptian president was the chief guest at the Republic Day parade. And now, of course, the Indian Prime Minister paying a reciprocal visit to Egypt. Egypt has also been invited for the G20 summit by India as a guest country. And not only Egypt, but other countries from Africa have also been invited by India for the G20 summit that will take place in September. That showcases India's focus on Africa and how India sees rise of Africa as an important development in the global multipolar world, a world where, of course, focus is on Asia and on Africa. If I talk about a larger African relationship, India and Africa, we have seen how essentially when it comes to the focus of the African countries, they see India as an important partner in several ways, whether it's defense, whether it's education, or whether it is more increased investment from India to Africa.
All right, that is our diplomatic correspondent, Sidhant Sibol, at the Ronald Reagan Center in Washington, D.C., and also have spoken to our correspondent, Molly Gambhir, who is at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. Thank you guys for talking to us. This marks the final chapter of the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit or tour in the United States. Is now headed, like we mentioned there, to Africa, more specifically to Northeast Africa, to meet with the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. And that will be a closely watched tour because it is his first visit to the African nation or to Egypt. Let's talk more about this visit by the Indian Prime Minister to the United States. Charles Kupchan from Washington, D.C. He's a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations and former special assistant to the President and Senior Director for European Affairs on the staff of the National Security Council in the Barack Obama administration. Charles, welcome to the broadcast and thank you very much for making time for WION World is One.
Glad to be with you.
Charles, before the Prime Minister did meet the diaspora, he met business delegates at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. He also made some statements. I'm just going to read a few pointers from his speech. He did speak about defense, which has been a bigger chunk of his visit to the United States. He says that defense sector partnership has achieved new heights during this visit. Why is it important for India and America to merge when it comes to matters security, stability of the Indo-Pacific and defense?
Well, I think the relationship between the United States and India is evolving at two different levels. On the one hand, you have the realm of diplomacy, of security, United States and India partnering in a way that they really never have before. And of course, it has a lot to do with common concern about the rise of China, the Chinese threat, the United States reaching out to India, bringing India into the Quad. And this is in part about trying to counter India, but it is also recognition of India's growing power, stature, size, economy on the global stage in an effort to channel U.S.-India relations in the right direction. At the same time, this is about people to people, society to society. And one of the reasons that I think the United States relationship with India is going to prosper and flourish in the coming years is there is a generally pro-American inclination in India, a pro-Indian inclination in the United States, large Indian diaspora here. So the fundamentals are there for societal integration, and business-to-business ties, particularly in defense and technology, are going to play a big role.
Well, the Indian Prime Minister's speech was accompanied by the U.S. Secretary of State, that is Antony Blinken, at the U.S. Strategic Partnership Forum at the Kennedy Center in Washington. And Blinken and the President of the United States, Joe Biden, had a similar statement. They said that U.S.-Indian partnership is more dynamic than it has ever been. And we also heard from the President saying that they need to keep it up and aim higher. What do you think about the President's statement?
Well, you know, I think that what we're looking at here is an inflection point in the relationship that is the beginning of the story. It's not the end of the story. There are still things that need to be worked out. The United States and India are really in different places when it comes to the war in Ukraine and relationship with Russia. India hasn't joined the coalition that is sanctioning Russia. It is buying Russian oil and gas. It continues to rely on Russia for military technology. And as a consequence, there's hard work to do in the years ahead. And the United States and India, I don't think they'll be fashioning a relationship that looks like a traditional relationship with the United States and its traditional allies like Germany or Japan or France. This is going to take on a different form. Both sides are going to have to get comfortable with each other. India is a country that has a long history of non-alignment. I don't think it's going to join the so-called bloc of democracies that emerged against Russia. So I think what Biden was saying here is this is really a wonderful beginning. We're launching a new partnership. We have a lot of work to do ahead as we build this partnership for the future.
Charles, finally, and I want your quick reaction to this. Going forward, in your own view, what do you think this partnership, do you think this partnership between United States and India will better and even create more business-friendly environments in the world?
Well, I think the U.S.-India business relationship is going to thrive in part because of the deglobalization that we're seeing as a consequence of the war in Ukraine, as well as distancing with China on technology. Some of that trade that used to go to China is going to go to India. The partnership about producing jet engines, cooperation on AI and other new technologies, this really is going to be a growth zone. So yes, bottom line here is the business relationship between the United States and India is likely to continue to grow substantially, and that's an important foundation for the broader strategic partnership that will be evolving in the years ahead.
Well, Senior Fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations and former Special Assistant to the President and Senior Director for European Affairs on the staff of the National Security Council in the Barack Obama administration. I've been talking to Charles Kupchan. Charles, thank you very much for talking to WION World is One today.
Good to be with you. Bye-bye.